Hi, so it's now time for the next segment. So it's going to be a hat-to-hat panel featuring Lisa Forte, who is a social engineering specialist and also a partner at Red Goat Cyber. And the panel also features Kevin Fielder, Ian Murphy, Zoe Rose, and Scott McGready. Take it away.
Thank you very much for that, Kim. I appreciate it. Okay. So just start from here. So welcome everyone to the Hat to Hat debate. I'm Lisa Forte, as I was introduced. And I just want to kind of start off by mentioning a initiative that a lot of the cyber people have got involved in that I think is really key, and hopefully some of you will be really interested in. So myself, Dan, and Rad started the Cyber Volunteers 19, and this was purely set up really to help healthcare providers to stay more secure during this time, and hopefully help them defend their hospitals against cyber attacks, because obviously at the moment they're super busy and they're trying to save lives. So we wanted to help them. So we put together a team. We've got just over 3,000 volunteers now, so it's really awesome. And we've got some other team members as well who are running some of the teams. So we have Ian Murphy, who is also on this panel, funnily enough, and Ian is running the threat intelligence team. So if any of you are interested in getting involved in providing threat intelligence to hospitals around Europe, he is your guy because he runs that team. Jessica Barker from Sygenta, which some of you will know as well, she is in charge of running the awareness team, and they've put together some really awesome awareness campaigns that are going to be translated into 7 different languages and sent out around Europe to help hospitals raise awareness with some of their staff. Because one of the things we were seeing a lot of was hospitals having consultants who were doing their consultancy sessions, and in these sessions the consultants would use Zoom or whatever application they wanted, and they would also be using their own personal Google Docs folders to upload patient test reports and stuff like that and share those with patients. So, you know, some of this awareness is really key, because what they've tried to do is just make things work as opposed to actually thinking about security. And then we have Jake Moore and Becky Pinkard, who are responsible for volunteer management, and they do an amazing job monitoring and managing the LinkedIn group where all of our volunteers apply to join the group. And to just give you a bit of an idea of where we actually are operating. So we are operating in all of these countries, which is crazy. We've actually just taken on some hospitals in St. Petersburg and Moscow, which is really interesting as well. And we just kind of had a discussion about it and thought, you know, actually politics doesn't really come into it at this point in time. It's about saving lives and helping people. So we were really keen just to help as many countries as possible. So our threat report every single week gets translated into all of these languages and sent out to hospitals in all of these countries to help them stay more secure, which is a really awesome outcome, really. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Here is, we're talking about the hat-to-hat debate, which I decided to put together because some of you may know this, but I was a lawyer, and I know, I'm sorry. And when I was studying law, one of the things we used to do an awful lot of was something called mooting, which is essentially debating. And it would have like an issue, something that was kind of topical, and people would take the agree or disagree side and have to argue it. And I think one of the things that was really good, and that's often missing in conferences when we have panel discussions, is that actually everyone takes the same side, and it A, becomes a bit boring, and B, I don't think it really moves our thinking on and our knowledge on. So I thought that it would be really fun to do a debate instead of a normal panel discussion. And one of the things I love about debating is that it's actually kind of really competitive as well. So when I used to do a lot of mooting when I was in law school, you used to try and sort of, I guess, sort of apprehend what your opponents would be saying. And if you got to go first, you'd say, well, you know, you'll all hear from my right honourable colleague, he'll claim that ... And you'd instantly dismiss everything you thought they were going to argue. And it was sort of great fun. So I thought it would be really interesting to try that in the InfoSec world, which is what we're going to do today. And a lot of the sort of things I know about social engineering have really come from my experience in law, because actually, when you think about lawyers, you have to build rapport really fast with judges, with juries. That's incredibly important that they like you, because if the jury don't like you, there's absolutely no hope that you are going to be successful. You've also got to make sure that your arguments are really persuasive, which is another thing that social engineers have to do as well. And finally, you have to dress in a certain way. You have to appeal to your audience so they think that you're someone who can be trusted instantly. So, for instance, I was once working for a criminal defense firm, and we had a case where this individual was being tried for assault. And we wanted to try and argue in his defense that the other gentleman, who was one of the key witnesses, was incredibly aggressive and had basically attacked our client. And that's what led to the assault. But the problem we had was that on the stand, he was presented really, really well. And the prosecution were presenting him as this calm, collected individual, and he really wasn't looking like he was aggressive. So my boss decided to take a bit of a different approach. And he turned around to me, and I was a young, wide-eyed law student. And he said, you know, you're a short, blonde girl. You look a bit innocent. Go up there and you're going to question him. And I want you to get everything he says wrong and keep going and keep going and keep going until he loses it. And I thought, I don't know about this. I'm not sure this is going to work. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it. So I had a go, and yeah, it didn't take very long. And before you know it, this guy was slamming his fists down on the table and yelling at me and shouting abuse at me and calling me all the names under the sun. And instantly you could see the jury going, yeah, no, I agree with their argument. He's aggressive. So all of this is exactly like social engineering. And I think a lot of this also comes into debating, as you'll probably see later on in this session, that the people who are on each team are going to try and appeal to you to try and win the argument. And you actually get to choose the winners, because on Twitter, if you follow me on Twitter, Lisa Forte UK, you will see polls that will go live as we debate each issue, and you can decide who you think should be the winner. So law and debating, I think, is really good, and is why we need to do more of it in conferences. And hopefully this will inspire us to do it live on stage as well, which is perhaps a little bit more intimidating. But we're going to move on, and I'm going to start introducing to you some of the people. So on team one, we have Zoe and Ian. Do we have Zoe and Ian? Are they logged in now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So we're going to start with Zoe. Just to introduce Zoe, if you don't already know her, she's absolutely fabulous. So she's someone who I consider to be one of the top-rated cybersecurity specialists. I honestly do. She's a Cisco champion. She has also been named one of the top 50 women in tech. And this is probably the most amazing thing I think I've ever read out about somebody, she appeared in Vogue magazine. I mean, that's amazing. She's a great speaker, and almost above all of that, she's an amazing ferret mum. She's got amazing ferrets, and I follow them on Instagram, and they bring a little shred of happiness to my life. So, Zoe, we've had a question for the audience for you, and they have asked, what has been hardest about being a successful woman in tech?
All right, well, that intro makes me sound so much cooler than I am, so I'll just go with it. But I don't know, being a woman in tech, well, I think the first thing is I tend to be a bit cautious about being called out or singled out as a woman in tech, because honestly, what tends to happen is there's this perception that I speak for all women.
Right.
I don't. So be mindful that, you know, my specific experience does not relate to everyone. But I have run into issues where people seem to think at my age, at my time in life, my priorities for work have shifted to family duties, which I'm sure you had to hear before. I've been fact checked to the point where I start to question myself. I struggle with this perception of when I want to be authoritative, I'm being too bossy or too much of a jerk, instead of being the boss. I've also had this really awkward situation quite a few times where when I'm kind, it's taken as flirty. So there is a lot of perceptions that you do kind of deal with, and reiterating that no, I do actually like working. But I think there's this other benefit that people don't recognize, and I think it was I can't remember who it was I was talking to, but they basically said, when you're a woman in tech, you generally are singled out as that, but you can use that to your advantage, because by default in the first start, you're unique to this room, and so you can use that platform to stand out from your colleagues. The cool thing is it might bring you to attention more often. The downside is there is that that need to keep up keep up with your image, I suppose you could say.
Okay, so quick question, just so people can get a bit of a feel for you, and it is Sunday evening, so we've got to have a bit of fun. Which do you prefer out of these, squirrels or raccoons?
Oh gosh, I think squirrels, because they're little and really fucking fast. Sorry.
Okay, private yachts or private jets?
Jets, because then I could go places.
Totally agree. And finally, sweet or savory snacks?
Savory.
Oh, really?
I know, don't hate me.
I do hate you a little bit. Okay, she's my second favorite cybersecurity specialist now. Okay, Ian is next. Ian is also on Zoe's team, and Ian is the co-founder of Lamentrix, a specialist threat hunting company. He is also, as you'll remember from my introduction, one of our team leaders for the Cyber Volunteers 19 initiative, leading the hospital threat intelligence team. There are rumours, most of which I started myself, that he is a failed footballer, a former model, and was rumoured to have once dated Paris Hilton. So Ian, we have a question for you from the audience as well, which says, I love your LinkedIn videos. Why did you start them?
Ego. Definitely ego. I have a massive ego. No, not. By the way, the only thing I could model are gloves and balaclavas. Anyway, I've unfortunately been in this industry over 25 years. And I absolutely hate snake oil salespeople. And I think I've done it from that point of view. I think they harm our industry more than people who just don't patch shit, more than people who just don't take security seriously. I think the people who go out there to make somebody think they get more than they're actually getting, or don't give them the full story around what they are actually getting and how hard it is to do, I think they do our industry a real disservice. So my goal in life is to call out those bullshitters, and I think that's what LinkedIn is great for. Pardon my French. This may happen from time to time throughout this whole debate. It will pass. You won't go home swearing at your children after. You might do, but it'll pass.
We accept no responsibility if you're sort of radicalized after this.
Indeed. I will accept failed footballer. Any rumours about Paris Hilton were probably started by me, and the modelling is probably railway modelling and stuff like that.
Okay, quick fire questions for you. Apple pie or chicken pie?
Apple pie.
Facebook or Twitter?
Oh, Twitter.
Going to university or doing an apprenticeship?
Doing an apprenticeship. Would never change doing it. It taught me how to talk to peers. It taught me how to respect peers in a way that I was one of their peers, coming from school and then going into a working environment. You've people who are teaching you at school demand respect. Actually, when you do an apprenticeship, you find out you've got to earn that respect, and they beat it into you in the most inhumane ways. I'm not condoning beating, maybe a little bit. I'm not condoning it, but I would never change it for the world. I did go to university afterwards. It was mainly to fix their plumbing, but I did go to university afterwards. But yeah, apprenticeship every day of the week.
Awesome. Okay, so that was team 1, who you will hear arguing together on various different points. So next we have team 2, which are Scott and Kevin. So we'll start with Scott. Scott is an educator. He has a focus on counter fraud, public safety, and awareness of cybersecurity generally within the public. He's worked really closely with law enforcement, and he has been on TV a lot. And he will probably say it wasn't a lot and be a bit modest, but it was a lot. I've seen it. He's also convinced, interestingly, that he can communicate with squirrels. We'll touch on that a bit later. So, Scott, we have a question for you from the audience, which is probably the nastiest question of all of the ones that came in.
Oh, here we go.
And
Okay.
it says, what was it like working with the police, and how was it different from the private sector?
Okay. That's a really good question to start with. So it was different. I went and I kind of joined up to try and open doors and kind of like make bridges, but I seem to burn a lot of those bridges recently. Just realizing that policing is so far behind and still stuck in this 1950s idea of, us versus them. And, there's old school, it's kind of like the old boy network. Everybody's friends. You only get further if you're friends with, the DCC or the ACC or all these other acronyms that people don't understand. And it's kind of like the tech community. We're quite self-facing. We don't really tend to look outside and try and figure out what other people are doing elsewhere, and they're still stuck in that. And I think that's so. It was interesting. It was really strange. I know everybody. Well, most people should know your background, so you kind of came from the same environment, and it's really bizarre. But at the same time, you can't really step away, even if you see a lot of crap going on. You can't really step away because you think you're making a difference. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the camaraderie in the police at its best is way better than it is in the private sector, in my personal experience at least. But yeah, I know there's a lot of problems. Anyway, Scott, quick fire questions for you. Beer or wine?
Beer, obviously.
Okay, quarantine or freedom? How do you seriously have to think about that?
I think everybody's expecting me to say this, so I'll go freedom because everybody's
okay. And at risk of being shouted at by the next person, Just Eat or Deliveroo?
Oh, Just Eat, absolutely.
Lovely man, one team.
It's got nothing to do with who's coming up next then. Okay, so next up we have Kevin Fielder. Kevin is the CISO of Just Eat, and he's an amazing fitness coach. I like to wind him up about it, but he does have a ton of knowledge. Now, he told me to tell you that he was a legend, which I've now done, so that's great. And he is a very cool InfoSec person, generally. So, Kevin, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Okay, we have a question for you.
Just quickly, I want to jump in and ask how I got a cool InfoSec person who likes Maryland cookies, and Ian got dated Paris Hilton and ex-footballer. I feel hard done by.
I just got to him first, so he got all the good rumors, and yeah, you got the short end of the straw.
Maryland cookies.
Okay, so from the audience, someone has asked, Kevin, why did you get into becoming a CISO, and how is it best to go about doing that?
Money and fame. But no, I just love what I do, right? So I love doing security stuff. Have done for more years than I want to admit, really. I think there's loads of different routes to doing it. So you've got to love it, right? So I think most jobs in security, you've pretty much got to love what you do, because it is 24/7. It is stuff you think about all the time. There are miscreants all over the place trying to do naughty things, right? So you've got to have a super passion for what you do it and kind of love it, I think. And in terms of becoming a CISO, there's technical CISOs and non-technical CISOs, and CISOs in banks and CISOs in kind of companies like ours, whatever else. There's a whole variety of different types. So I think it's just build your career, build your kind of network, get stuck into a wide variety of different things. You're going to do a lot better doing my kind of job if you've got a bit of knowledge about lots of stuff. So if you're super hardcore in like one area that you love, probably not quite as good as someone who likes being a bit of all sorts of things, because I need to have that like thin veneer of knowledge across a whole range of things rather than being kind of a super expert in one. And then I have a team of people who are way better than me at the things they do to make me look awesome and make us look awesome.
I think Kim is like humming in the background, which is
Oh no,
lovely.
that's I don't know if you can see my camera. That's my little one. So I also, anyone who's on Twitter, I'm sitting with my little 4-year-old who's super cute. Therefore, we win and Ian loses. Sorry, mate.
Okay.
Whoa. Nobody told me about that type of dirty tricks.
I can bring in my ferrets.
Yes.
Just warning
This is
you.
like starting to slip from InfoSec and just being like, who has the cutest stuff?
Yeah, my daughter, children and pets, right? Let's forget security.
Okay, quick fire questions for you then. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Good answer. Pasta or pizza?
Ooh, pizza.
Maryland cookies or Oreos?
Maryland cookies.
Oh, so ridiculous. Anyways, okay, so that's the intros done. So just to give you an introduction of what's going to happen, each team are going to get an opportunity to argue for or against one of the statements that's coming up. They will get time to present their case and also rebut the other side. I have posted the first question already on Twitter with a live poll. So at Lisa Forte UK, you can find that and you can vote for who you think should be the winner. And tweet any questions that you have for any of the participants straight to me through the DMs though, please, so they cannot see them because that would be cheating. Okay, so our first statement that they will be arguing about: nothing should be considered out of scope when it comes to pen tests and red teaming tests. So Zoe and Ian will be agreeing with this statement and Kevin and Scott will be disagreeing. So over to you, Zoe and Ian. Let's hear what you've got.
All right, so Ian, do you want me to pick up this part and then you'll pick up the next one first and then switch, if that's okay?
Perfect.
I'm just going to go with it. I would say nothing should be considered out of scope because the entire goal of it is to identify prior to a malicious actor, what's vulnerable, what's going to happen. What are they going to get access to? So if we say, actually that's out of scope, that kind of defeats the entire purpose. Also, if you do it in pieces, it can be more real life but manageable, if that makes sense. And Ian, I know you have quite a few really good points, so I'll let you take over.
So you see, if we're not going to test it, who is going to test it? So if you're going to turn around and say, well, we can't do that, it may fall over. I get the idea of that. I really do get the idea. That would probably form part of Scott and Kev's argument. But the problem with that is somebody else will test it for you. And those people who will test it for you won't be as kind as the testers. So whilst I don't believe in maliciously trying to bring stuff down, if you're not going to push and test your defenses, somebody else will. And for my money, it takes a really brave leader and a really confident security professional, which I know Kevin is, therefore he can't argue against it, is to actually want to find it. See what I did there, Kev? Want to find out where their weaknesses are and plug those weaknesses. Because if you're coming at this with just hey, we've had a scan, or we had a pen test last year, and what did you do about it? Not much. We just ticked a couple of boxes and kind of moved on. If we can actually think more proactively instead of passively sitting there and waiting for our pants to be pulled down, then we've got more of a chance of staying out of the news and staying safe. Stay safe, people.
So I think that do you mind if I jump in first, Scott?
Yeah, on you go. On you go.
So the challenge with that is you guys have taken a very narrow view and you've already out of scoped a whole bunch of things in your heads before you start talking about scope, right? So how many red teams have you seen where they kidnap the chairman's children to get the password? That's out of scope. How many?
You're just making stuff up now.
I have seen that.
Yeah, but rarely, right? So you don't tend to have in scope things like muggings, or you don't crack passwords. You talk to passwords out of people. Do you know what I mean? So you don't do any of that kind of thing. So I don't get your password by mugging you, do I? I just don't get your password.
Could do.
I'm from Liverpool. I get your password from mugging you.
Ian's true colours shining through. But by default, you've already had to narrow the scope from actual criminals to a red team exercise that's within the acceptable parameters of a contract, right? You've kind of already done some of that. Shush, Zoe, I can see you trying to dive in and butt in. You don't get to rebut till we finished.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm just teasing. So I think you're always going to outscope some things because of business damage and limitations within the law, right? So there's some things that aren't legal that the criminals will do that you won't do as a red team or a pen testing. Well, you might do, but you wouldn't be allowed to. So you're always going to outscope some of those. Scott, do you want to kind of come in with some more reasonable points?
Yeah, I mean,
I've gone straight to the extreme.
Water now, Scott. He's treading water.
I know. I was just thinking that was the ex-KCD, drug them and then just beat them with the $5 wrench stuff. But no,
that's 100% right.
That's exactly it. But no, Ian, just to come back on something you said keep you out of the news. You know, everything's in scope. That'll keep you out in the news. What if pen test happens to company's entire back end and entire infrastructure goes down for like 2 or 3 days? I think the recent one that I remember in the last couple of weeks is 118 Money. So that's a full credit card provider. Other credit card providers are available, by the way, but that's a full credit card provider where people couldn't access their stuff. They couldn't access their money. They couldn't pay their bills. Now, I'm not saying it was a red team. It was kind of like a pen test of sorts, but let's say it was, just for the purposes of this debate. That's a full credit card infrastructure that's gone down for 3 or 4 days. It was in the news. Customers are pissed off that they can't get access to anything. They can't do anything. So yeah, I would say things like that, definitely, you know, that's why scoping matters. It matters not to bring down a live infrastructure because you have no idea the impact of that.
And I get that. I really do get that, Scott. It's a valid point. However, the issue with that is that there's a question to be asked: was it a robust infrastructure in the first place? If a red team testers, or maybe even if a scan has brought that system down, do they have deeper problems other than that? And I'm not advocating to bring systems down. I'm really not. But when you think about it, most attacks happen through fairly innocuous generic stuff that hasn't been done for a very long time. And even when you do scope that out and de-scope it and point it out to them that, going back to the SQL slammer days, hey, you should have passed SQL, and then everyone caught a cold. Even when you point that stuff out to them, the issue is people generally don't fix it. And we're getting to the point now where people are taking the 300-page tenable scans that are given to them as a pen test, right? That's not all pen testers, of course, I get that, but pen tests and hand over 20 grand, thank you very much. And they're just putting them in the bin because it's a tick box exercise. So if we're not going to change our approach to helping people properly defend themselves, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing we've always done. But
I think that's a different point, though, mate. Are the outputs from pen tests and red teams useful and actionable to the company that's paying for them? That's not a scope question. That's basically saying
I would like to argue that nobody mentioned the fact that I said done in pieces. So yes, you can't scope the entire infrastructure all at once, but you can do it over time. Because a pen test at the end of the day, a pen test rent time, that's a once snapshot view, yeah? So you're
saying by scoping multiple tests, you can get to a thorough test at the end through multiple scope tests?
I'm saying one test done in pieces.
I mean, that's
it's not how to scope.
I think you'll find each one has a scope, though.
But
and also how much.
However, just to back up what Zoe's saying, she's not saying that you actually scope a pen test and say, don't do this area because that's a bit. What we're saying is scope it in pieces, and you'll get to that eventually.
But you're saying scope it, right, Ian? As you just said,
I'm not saying you can't deduct.
Zoe and Ian, we've had someone message in saying, for Zoe and Ian, do they feel that a test could be done within scope? However, any potential gaps that are out of scope highlighted to the client with a view to obtaining a new scope on the next test?
So that's typically how I have to deal with them. Yes, there is a scope, and you do say this was not done in this test.
And
potentially you could do that.
We haven't touched on is budget, right? So reality is my budget doesn't necessarily allow me to have all of the things tested all of the time. So you have to do some scoping and sizing of pen tests, because it's not like it costs me £20 a day to have testers working on my site, right? So there are also budgetary concerns.
That would be brilliant. So I think, yes, I would agree budgets are a problem, but I also would say that if you're not testing it and your reason is, oh, I don't have the money, I will also say that, well, when it breaks and it's in the media and your reputation is ruined, you still won't have the money.
But you can say that about everything, right? I should collect every single log. I should monitor everything. I should have threat intel. I should have a large 24/7 team. I should patch everything. I should have a full inventory. I should have a full CMDB. I should have everything, right? I haven't got an infinite budget, and no business does. So you have to chop
you
it
can
as best
prioritise
you
it.
can. You do, but I can't prioritise just testing.
Before, Kevin, you do not have to collect every log. What have I told you about this? You just you do not collect logs, right? You don't have to do.
No, but do you know what I mean? You've got to prioritise things, and you can't just do offensive, right? I've got to do some blue team as well as some red team. I can't just have. I've just spent my entire budget on pen testing it, but I can't fix anything because I have no money left.
But
that's
okay,
super crazy.
I'm gonna just draw a little line underneath this. The votes are in from this particular poll, and the winner is Kevin and Scott with 51%. Yes! But only with 51% to 49. So
can we retire there and call it a day?
I didn't even vote for myself.
I don't even know how to vote.
Are you seeing some?
I'm going to open up 17. I'm going to open up 17 new Twitter accounts now, just to get in there.
Okay, so the next question. Companies should always be responsible for the actions of their employees during work hours, even if they go rogue and steal data. So arguing in agreement with this statement is Zoe and Ian, and disagreeing with this statement are Kevin and Scott. So over to you, Zoe and Ian.
Oh, so we're going to agree on this one, right? So, and you did mention before, Lisa, about my failed football career. So it was a fail. Well, I did play football for a living at a point, and all the best teams I would ever play for had a strength of character, and whether we won or lose or lost, rather, we took it in our stride. And the great managers and the great leaders I've ever played for and worked for would take it as a personal problem for them. Should we lose, they would never single out a player. They would never so you look at all the great managers, Sir Alex Ferguson, Shanks, Paisley, all of those guys. You see, I'm a Liverpool supporter, but I do recognise Sir Alex is a great manager. Is that they never single out their players. They never single them out for criticism. And actually, when you are part of an organisation that the leadership has your back like that, and that you start to behave responsibly to those leaders. So companies should always be responsible for their employees when they do bad stuff, but also as well congratulating those employees and giving them the kudos when they do good stuff as well. There's a flip side to this. Whenever something bad happens, or whenever I'm in a customer and I'm talking to them about risk or risk management, I always say to them that actually the issue here isn't whether that one person did that, the rogue employee did that, because nobody remembers the name of the person in the Capital One breach, right? They just know as the Capital One breach. So the issue here is that you have to accept when they're doing something on your behalf, either in your hours, your office hours, or outside of your office hours, that they're your responsibility, they're your employees, and you have to drill into them a sense of belonging and a sense of need and a sense of togetherness and teamwork within your organization. And that way you can reduce those issues, those things that may cause you embarrassment. Sorry, Zoe, over to you.
No, that's fine. I was also going to bring up the Bupa, I think it was Bupa International, their incident that happened, because again, that was an internal rogue employee. They accessed a lot more data than they should, and I believe it was they gave it to a third party or something. It was intentional and naughty. And again, we remember Bupa, we don't remember them, because the court of public opinion doesn't really care if it was the company's fault directly, or if it was a rogue employee, they're not going to stand on the side of a company being like, it's not our fault. In reality, it is actually their fault, because they're giving access to the systems, this data, and they have to build it in a way that protects the user from intentional and unintentional actions, as well as protects the company. So I 100% think that actually, even if it wasn't part of their job, the whole point of the separation of duties, the whole point of the principle of least privilege, all of these things are built in a way to minimize misuse, whether it's intentional or not. So 100% the company is liable, because when you go to court, for example, or not court, sorry, wrong word, I'm thinking of lawyers. When you have to deal with a regulation issue and you report to the ICO in the UK and the DPA or something, I don't know what the terms are. Either way, it's still the company that is liable.
Okay, so you and Ian are saying that you agree. So you all know that the High Court and the Court of Appeal held Morrison's vicariously liable for their member of staff. However, that was overturned by the Supreme Court recently, who said that on a point of law, Morrison's were not responsible for the action of that member of staff who stole data and put it onto his laptop. So what you and Zoe are arguing that in that case, Morrison should be liable following your reasoning. Is that correct?
I would say yes, because even if the court didn't find or overturned it or whatever, the reality is the people that it affects don't really care. It's still going to affect them regardless of who did it, and it's still the reputation of the company. I don't really care if a court says, no, it's not really your fault, because at the end of the day, I also know they made it available or configured it in a way.
And also, don't forget, these companies and governments as well. These companies and governments
Otherwise,
as well.
we'll get no votes because everyone will fall asleep.
Do background checks and security checks.
You have a lovely voice. It doesn't put people to sleep.
Okay, I have a comeback for all that. So just one brief point. Like, if we're looking at it in the basis of, small company or even small-ish company or medium-sized company, yeah, you can kind of go, right, you should have vetted all your employees, and it's clear when someone's sticking like 1 million USB drives, whoever uses USB drives now, but they're sticking 1 million USB drives in and clearly dumping all the stuff. But at the same token, if you're dealing with a business or a corporation or an enterprise or Booz Allen Hamilton, where you're dealing with like loads of stuff, you can't be responsible for monitoring every employee 24/7. That's why you vet the employee beforehand. You see whether they're going to leak stuff beforehand. You try and get a gauge of their personality. Clearly, I will never be employed at Booz Allen Hamilton, but that's another story. But yeah, you have to vet that stuff, because all that happens is you're going to have to either treat your employees like children or lock everything down to a point where it's just going to grind all work to a halt. You have to get management approval every 2 minutes.
But there's a difference between liability and criminality, right?
So I think there's a couple of things here. The statement says companies should always be responsible. So we've based whether they should or shouldn't on the court of public opinion. Surely that's not whether they should or shouldn't. That's just a bad response to things. So the actual crux question is, do we morally think someone should be responsible for the actions of all the people that work for them? Which I don't think we've answered. But also, if you take that through it during working hours. So I'm sitting at home on a Monday lunchtime during working hours, and I'm on my personal laptop and I do something stupid or that causes offence or say something bad or whatever it happens to be. Is the company responsible for me doing something on my personal laptop that's inappropriate just because it happens to be between the hours of 9 to 5? What happens if it's at 5:31? So how do we distinguish? What do we kind of mean by actions here? I think we've kind of got a defined set that we may be saying. If you narrowed the question, say we should be responsible for what someone does with the company's data during working hours on company devices, you might get to a point where we'd agree on that. But this is so broad, you're saying you're responsible for all actions of your employee during a set of hours, but not outside of hours. So if I steal data after I finish work, so at 6:30, I finish work at 5:30, I steal some data at 6:30, not during working hours.
That's all
You're
right.
not responsible at that point.
Okay.
This
But
this
Off the
if
clock.
it is done on company
Off the
through
clock.
company,
Come on,
but
people.
this is the thing. When I started with a company that deals years ago, when dealt heavily with reputation, they gave me very specific guidelines that I had to follow, and it was including like locking down my personal social media, not linking. When I'm presenting, for example, at conferences, I wasn't presenting as them; I was presenting as me. So if you're talking about companies being responsible for employees during working hours, from my perception, my understanding, that scope is as a business or on their business laptop or within their business environment or representing the company publicly. I would say this is the thing though, because when you hire somebody, you're hiring because you believe that they're not going to do bad things. You do background checks, you do limit their access, or you should limit their access based on what they actually need to do, and put protections in place. If that is all done and they're still doing not so good things, you then take actions to remove them from the environment. So in my personal opinion, that appears like you're taking responsibility, because you're saying, yeah, they're doing something wrong, they're making us look really bad, so we're going to remove them. If you're saying, well, it's not really our fault because they can make their own decisions, then you're not really protecting them, are you? You're just saying, well, I think, please be good, and I'm not going to do anything if you're bad.
So just for clarity, if I, on my personal laptop at my home, because I'm working from home, post something on the internet that you think is inappropriate, you think the company's responsible for my actions at that point?
If you're saying me as this person working at this company.
No, but if I'm
if
not,
you're
but
just
it doesn't
posting
say
as
that,
your
though.
personal.
That's not what the question says. You're arguing for a different question. You've chosen to reframe the question to argue for something because you don't agree with that point yourselves. So now you've changed that question.
Can I just say something really quickly, just to clarify? So the crux of the Morrison's argument, because I'm this sort of person, so I watched the entire Supreme Court trial, but the crux of the argument was they actually relied on another case from Morrison's, where a petrol station attendant had gone outside and had beaten up a customer outside of the forecourt, so not on Morrison's property, and they held Morrison's vicariously liable for the assault on this individual. So he was during work hours, he was wearing his work uniform, he'd met the customer on the petrol forecourt, and then proceeded to leave the area and then go and beat him up down the road, and they held Morrison's liable for that. So what do you think about that? Do you think that's right, or do you think that's wrong according to your arguments?
According to my argument, that is holding them responsible, because he's met him at work and he's wearing his uniform, and I don't know how you could say that isn't responsible. It's just like that lady on, I think it was a lady on Twitter that received she went to get tech support, and then the tech support person used the email he gained access to through supporting her to then contact her privately. Again, that would, in my opinion, would make that company have to deal with it, if that makes sense.
Also, as well, what if this is a Premier League footballer in his own time who goes out and headbutts somebody? What's going to happen then?
Also,
I mean, one rule for one, one rule for another.
Let's be honest, if he's a footballer, he'll probably lose the fight.
but also a good example is in Canada, for the ice hockey. We had that guy, what was his name? Was it Kane or something? Very young guy, got a lot of money being young, and he spent it and went crazy, did lots of crazy things, and everybody looked very badly on him and the brand he was with.
But this, I think there's two separate points there. So if people are looking badly on the brand, yes, they might do that. But is it actually the responsibility of the brand how he behaved? That's the question we're trying to answer.
Yeah, so the court of public opinion is
responsible.
Totally different to the responsibility angle.
I would disagree, absolutely. Because in a breach,
you believe
no matter
in following...
if you okay, so in a breach, if you do something really bad, and everybody's like, holy shit, you did something really bad, and the ICO goes, okay, well, we probably should investigate them. They're going to, it's more likely they're going to investigate them, and that does take, that is a big part. If you're breached and you have X fine, but your reputational loss is so massive, that's going to affect your business as well. So I think that reputation should be cut, and public opinion should be.
Okay, we've got to draw a line under it because I'm conscious of the time. The results are in, and Zoe and Ian have won this with 52%.
I told you, they just talked for so long at the start. No one was listening by the time they got to us.
Okay, so
isn't that what?
So the third and final statement before that they're going to have a whole load of people argue about on a Sunday is a company or public body should never pay a ransom. So Kevin and Scott agree with this, and Zoe and Ian are disagreeing with this. And as before, the poll is now up and live on Twitter, so get voting. Over to you, Kevin and Scott, this time.
Scott, just don't stop talking and we'll win.
Yeah, okay, so that's my forte. I can do that, right? So agree, a million times agree. How many times have we seen someone's been ransomware? 6 months later, there's an update, someone's done dehash stuff, someone's started working on it, people have written backdoors into it, they've analyzed the malware and managed to somehow reverse it. If we're paying, we're literally paying. We're basically showing it's like there's a phrase or a word I'm looking for that's basically saying, look, you know, you're being rewarded for committing this crime and it's just going to get worse, and they're going to keep using that. Like, paying up straight away is a really bad idea. Paying up even after 6 months is a bad idea, or 2 years. I don't think it should be done. We're A, rewarding the crooks, and B, that's where I sit. Kevin?
Yeah, so I think the big one for me on this as well is you're fundamentally funding organised crime.
Yeah.
It's the reason why, if you look at, I came from kind of financial services, and if you look at like banks and financial services kind of accept a certain amount of fraud as the cost of doing business. The police and people who deal with criminals don't want any of that, because every penny that goes through to fraud or crime is funding drugs, trafficking children, all of the really bad stuff. That's where this money goes. It's funding that kind of criminality. So if you pay the ransom, you're paying the worst criminals and funding organised crime fundamentally. Aside from the fact of that, Scott's excellent points around you've got no guarantee it's going to get unencrypted. You've got no guarantee they won't do it again. You become a bigger target. You make more people want to do it, because as soon as crime pays, guess what? People flock to it. You look at how things happen across the internet. As soon as one thing works, whether it's ransomware, whether it's DDoS, whether it's whatever else, as soon as it starts working, everyone starts doing it because you see the money. So you follow it and get more of it. So the more you pay, the more people do it, because the more people want to make that money. So
Pop culture reference for anybody watching, season 1, episode 1, Mr. Robot. Slightly different context, but you just keep coming back and asking for more money. So yeah.
So long and short of it, you'll make the problem worse. You've got no guarantee it's going to be okay, and you are funding organised crime. Cannot be okay.
Right. So I'm going to jump in here.
So your argument is bad people will do shit. That's the
they'll do more of it if you pay them.
Bad people will do bad things.
If you pay them.
People do shit, right?
If you pay bad people to do bad shit, they do more bad shit, Ian.
And they
if
always
you pay
have
people, but if you don't pay them, they're still going to do bad shit. Like,
what we're talking about is you're reducing the opportunistic ones.
A lot of criminals have day jobs. They do jobs in the day.
So far, your only argument is you shouldn't pay them because they might do it anyway.
My argument is not that. My argument is, when in a perfect world, when there is, you prepared properly, you're able to do this, and it's all good and ready, and you're able to restore from backup, awesome. But as we know, the world is not perfect. If a company fails to properly protect their environment or their people, and the only option is to pay, and it's not something they could, it wasn't designed with a flaw, and literally there's no other option. Either you do have to make some payments, or people lose their job and more people are impacted. A company goes out of business, and who are you really failing in this situation? Yes, you did fail. You failed in the beginning because you got it in the first place. You failed because you didn't protect it. Yes. But also, are you going to then make somebody lose their job and maybe not feed their children, or not be able to afford to live? Like the little bit that you're making in this payment is not going to, by not paying it, you're not going to stop cyber criminals. You're not going to solve, and the world is going to become peaceful again. It's not going to make that difference. What it is going to do is it's going to make your business be able to run again.
But you're
Ian,
assuming
you have a really, really good point. So you should make that one.
Yeah, go in.
The one you told me earlier.
So there's a really good book by a chap called Chris Voss, called Never Split the Difference. Now, Chris is an ex-FBI negotiator and has worked on many ransom cases and has actually been in a lot of high-profile hostage situations. And unfortunately, he does say you have to pay the ransom at some point. You don't always have to pay the what the ransomer wants, because actually they are in it to extort money, and we all don't want to fund crime. Kev, I think we're all agreed on that, right? We don't want to fund crime. We don't want to perpetuate it. But unfortunately, there's people out there who will do bad stuff. And the question comes is, what if that ransom is to save a life? What if that ransom is to unlock a National Health Service set of computers, quite relevant, I think, where a bunch of them are connected to ventilators that are keeping people alive? Well, what do? Do you stand on your principles then? And you turn around and go, we're not going to fund this? Or do you have it as a sensible risk mitigation approach? But I'm going to caution on this as well. That shouldn't be a risk mitigation approach all the time, right? You only get to use it the once, and you really need to up your game after that. But if people's lives are on the line, you can't stand on principles, because we aren't politicians. We aren't the people who will grandstand this and stand up and say we won't pay ransoms, because at the end of the day, that decision we then make will ultimately end up with people who die.
But that assumes that people are going to be honest and upfront and actually pay and actually unlock. Unlock. They're actually going to unlock
but if
stuff
that's
when
your
you pay.
only option, but this is the thing: if your only option is to pay,
Okay,
and from your point of view, the only solution is to pay, and you pay and they don't unlock it, you did everything you could.
So, but you've got a couple of challenges with that. Ian says we're not politicians, but he's gone straight to the standard politician's argument for any kind of legislation where you want to do something you shouldn't, which is talk about life and limb. So I'll make it seem like if you don't agree to this, lives will be lost, therefore you're bad and you should do the argument.
I'm not saying in every situation, but in some situations it is what happens.
And
when people lose their job, even if it's not
finish?
a direct, they're dying today, you are impacting them.
No,
3 minutes left. 3 minutes left.
But then the point you've got to consider is, if we're going to talk about life and limb and people losing lives and whatever else, this money goes to organised crime. That goes to selling drugs to your children. So you're going to lose lives. I
know that that's your argument.
Well, that was Ian's argument. Ian jumped in with the life and limb thing.
Children are going to die from drugs when you pay ransom.
If you guys are going to go to life and limb, ask people who deal with real crime.
Yeah,
right?
But okay.
They don't
so you're saying they should die because we didn't plan properly. They should die for the cause.
Or people should die because
for our principle.
We should pay criminals to commit crime. That's what you're saying.
Okay, guys, we don't have much time left.
People die because criminals commit crime.
Maybe unsurprisingly, the results are 50-50.
Boom.
What?
Oh.
So I just want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists. Go and follow them on Twitter. They're all amazing. And please go and donate if you haven't already done so to MSF, because it's a really good cause and it's one that is really important right now. But thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.